going on, everybody? Welcome to LUMIX Live this week. We have maybe a little bit more of a technical kind of conversation that I want to have today. We're going to be talking about the LUT system that is found within actually all of the new LUMIX cameras across the board, and I'm going to break it down into a couple of different pieces here, and a lot of this actually stems from some of the conversations that were happening over on our Discord, which is linked down in the description below. So if you have questions and things like that regarding LUTs, feel free to drop them in the chat. You can tag at LUMIX USA, and we can try to get to as many of them as possible today. And if you have questions about other topics as well, feel free to drop those in the chat as well. If we have time, we will get to as many of those as we can between the three different main points of the topic that I want to cover today. But yeah, otherwise... we're going to be going over, as I said, LUTs in general. So we're going to do kind of an overview of what a LUT is, and why we're using that as our method for different color profiles, as a very broad sense of the term. I'm also going to jump into Photoshop because I've had some questions about how to create your own looks, and I'm going to cover it from the photographic side because I don't have Resolve on this computer, so I don't really have much that I can show in that sense, but if you work in Resolve, you probably know how to do this already. And then we're going to talk about actually using them on the camera, and that's going to be a couple part piece. That's going to be talking about LUMIX Lab, and also how do you move LUTs from your computer to Lab, how do you pair them properly, because one of the things that I've noticed is there's two main things that I've noticed in the conversations. One is that a lot of stills users are using vlog based LUTs, and I want to explain a couple of the problems doing it that way, and some of the ways that it actually can make a lot of sense, but also people kind of not necessarily knowing how to set them up correctly. So there's the idea of being able to put a LUT on the camera, but then if you built that LUT under a certain pretense, but then put it on the camera and you don't have everything set up right, it may be applying to the wrong, kind of base profile. So I want to cover all of that in today's stream. But yeah, before we jump into that, if you're in the US, I encourage you to take a look at LUMIX Pro Services. We have the Red and Platinum tier available. The Red tier is free. If you pick up any new LUMIX camera, get yourself registered on LUMIX Pro Services. As I said, it is free. Follow the QR code right below me if you're in the US, or there's a link down in the description. But if you're someone who likes a higher level of service and support, make sure to take a look at the Platinum tier. That is a paid level service that gets you your 3-year warranty, which the Red tier gets you as well. But on top of that, you're going to get things like 2-day repairs with next day shipping both ways, 20% off out of warranty repairs. You're going to get annual sensor cleanings, lens calibration, firmware updates, all that kind of fun stuff. And you also get access to an exclusive hotline. So if you prefer to speak to someone instead of going through chat or emails, you can always pick up the phone, call Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Time, and you'll have access to that as well. So with that, before we actually dive into the topic, let's run through the chat, because there's been a lot of conversations already happening. And what is my hair doing? My hair is like east. Okay. All right. One of the first questions that came up was, actually, and Cliff, Matt is working on this with you. Matt has asked you a question. If you could let him know the answer to the question that he asked, he can probably help address that a little bit better, regarding the highlight clipping values. The second question, the one that you asked that I can address right now, and we have talked about this before, but was about file size limitations, and it's partially addressed. FC partially addressed some of it there, and it is actually tied to the concept of exFAT versus FAT32 and some of the others there, but excuse me. But traditionally, depending on the media source that you're going to record on, whether it's SD, CF Express, or SSD, your file structure or the formatting of that media will determine what the largest single clip, in this case video clip, can be that is recorded. And in the photo side, this is more limited to, honestly, how big of a card you use, because it's however high the counter can go for stills. Like a 1 terabyte card on an S1II, even with an SSD, it's going to show 999 plus, because you're more than 10,000 images can be captured. But if we just focus down on video oriented side here, if you are using, and this will be broad sense of the concept, an SDHC card. So these are old cards. You're probably not going to be using them in modern cameras because they're going to be much slower. They're not recommended to use in modern cameras, unless you've got one hanging around to do things like firmware updates because you want just a small card to do that with, which is what I do, or I do now. Those cards that are formatted in FAT32 are going to be limited to a 4 gigabyte limit. That means that any individual video clip, single continuous video clip, can only be 4 gigs. Now, what the cameras have done, and this is kind of a general camera thing of what they've done, at least the way we've always done it, is if you're doing a normal full-blown recording, every 4 gigs is going to be its own clip. That means that, at the end of the day of shooting, you would have to take those clips, put them into your editor, butt them up together based on the file name, and then they'll play as one continuous clip. That's a file structure limitation because of the formatting of the media. We used to have this problem with USB thumb drives where you couldn't put anything like over 2 gigs, and then it was 4 gigs, and then it was much higher than that. As technologies move forward, and as we're using different media sources, those file sizes have gotten bigger. So when we move to SDXC, which is the higher capacity SD cards, and typically they start at 64 gigs and higher, at that point you were now limited to 96 gigabytes per individual video file size. And again, these aren't limitations put on by the camera manufacturer. These are limitations that are because of the formatting standard for what that format can handle for the largest individual file size. Now, when we move to things like CF Express or we move to SSDs, that changed again. That went up to like 600 something gigs. I think the highest one I've seen is like 900 and something gigs. But in any event, all of those different options will affect what you may or may not see on the cameras that you're using. It kind of depends on what format you're using. Depending on the media source that you're using within your camera, media does flag to the camera like, hey, this is my file format structure, this is the size, this is the speed ratings I have. There are all these little checks that happen when you put a card in a camera, and you've probably seen this before. If your camera's on, you plug a card in, you see it, kind of activity for a little bit. That's the camera and the media doing a handshake to say, hey, these are my specifications. This is the speed that I claim I can sustain. This is the, this is the size of I don't know if they're called sectors anymore, but like this is how large of a file I can take. This is my file formatting structure. All of that stuff will tell the camera like, hey, based on the information the card is telling me, this is what we can do with it. Early on, a little bit of a background for a lot of people. Early on, and we'll throw back to like the olden days, where people were having some problems with memory cards that would corrupt files. This was part of that problem, was that handshake. The cards were saying that they could do something that they weren't able to do, which meant the camera was just thinking like, hey, I got this checklist of things that I'm allowed to do. I have this much, resource to work with. I have this much buffer to work with. Cool. I'm just going to use that because it trusts what the card is telling it. And when that kind of happens, you run into where it overwrites and then it would hang up, and then all of a sudden you'd have a corrupt file because the card, in essence, the card lied about what it could do and the camera doesn't know any better. So as we moved further and further into larger capacity cards, newer file formats, newer recording types, those values change. All of that to be said that when you're using and you're starting to get into really high capacity media and you're doing video recording for single clips, there's two thought processes with this. One is, what is the largest amount that I could write if I just click record and let it run? One single individual clip. And the camera will tell you, it'll say like, hey, you've got, 25 hours that you can record. But then when you stop that recording, all of a sudden you may see like, oh, well, it says I have a little bit of extra time left. Maybe I have like 5 minutes. Maybe I have 20 minutes. The logic there is, this is the largest amount of time that you could do an individual clip, because that's the most commonly thought of thing. You may not think like, hey, I can do, click record and let it run. And, all of a sudden now when you get back, you're like, well, I've got like 2 or 3 different, clips on here. And you can force the camera into doing that, because you can do segmented file recording, which will force the camera to basically cut clips instead of one individual recording. So that's one logic is, if the camera says you've got 2 hours and it's based on, Cliff is like, you're pointing out like 650-ish gigs, or whatever that media source is saying its largest file size is. Yeah, the camera's going to tell you how long you can record on a single individual clip. There could be argument to be made to say like, well, what is the total recording time available? And that can work. I find it to be a little less useful at that particular point, because usually those values, because we're working with cards that are in most cases 256, 512 gig are still the most commonly used cards. 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte. As far as media cards go, they're still on that cusp of, they're not really meant for long video recording. A lot of them have sustained write speed issues or thermal problems. So in some cases, it doesn't necessarily make sense to know like, well, what's the total space if it can't even get to that? So yeah, basically always just look at what your camera says. If you put a 1 terabyte card in and it says that you can record for, 2 hours of recording, you're going to get at minimum 2 hours of recording. The remainder that's left over may be like margin of error or very minimal few minutes recording that in most cases you're probably going to want to swap the card anyway at that point, because little known fact about solid state media, whether you're using SD cards, CF Express, or SSDs, if you run them to full capacity, so if you have a 1 terabyte card and you fill it to 1 terabyte, the more you get to the end of where there's very little space left, the slower the cards typically end up running. And the higher chance you have of potentially having a problem, because maybe there's problems with error checking or things like that on that media. So yeah, in a lot of cases, that's why a lot of decisions are made is like, okay, well, it's just going to tell you what the largest clip is that you can record versus, the theoretical limit that the card could potentially have. All right, let's see here. FC says, if AF switch is in the AFC position for single photo, will the camera continuously focus while AF on is held down even after obtaining focus? Yes. If you're in continuous autofocus and you push the back AF button or the AF on button, this is back button focusing. If you're a still shooter or wildlife, you probably use this. AFC will continuously stay trying to focus. If you flip the camera to AFS and you're using single focus, when you press that AF on button, it's going to focus, acquire focus, and then stop recording. We used to have an AFF mode, which is flexible single autofocus. This meant that if it detected a large enough difference in the subject distance, it would, try to reacquire focus, and that would work if you had your thumb pressed on the AF on button. But no, if you're in modern cameras with AFS, press the AF on button, it's going to go to focus, lock focus, and stay. If you're in continuous, it's just going to continuously focus, just as if you had your finger pressed on the shutter button. For some wildlife photographers, and I know some other styles of photography, it's a preferred method. I never got used to it, so I just always use shutter button for that. I find it's easier to keep myself when I need to trigger something if I have my finger on the button, the shutter button for it. Doogie Ham says, I seem to have this problem with loading real-time LUTs on my S1R2. When I load some third-party LUTs into the LUT library, they come in looking really faded. This is a really good example as to why I wanted to talk about LUTs today. So let's jump into the topic then. So LUTs. What are LUTs? Well, LUT is an acronym for lookup table. In essence, if you want to break this down into probably the most simplified thing, a LUT is a profile, a color profile, a look, similar things that you'd be using in Photoshop or Lightroom or Capture One, where you apply a predetermined assumption of what colors should be within an image. If you're used to working in the Adobe world, you've probably seen, the profile tab that says if you've got it set up correctly and you're using Adobe, you can set it to camera matching, which will match what the camera, or get very close to what the camera's indicated color profile was that was used during capture. Or you'll see it'll say something like Adobe Standard or Adobe Adaptive. That's the new one that's being used. If you're in Capture One uses a unified color profile, and this is more of a studio photography kind of thing where, I don't really care what the camera's using. I want to be in a standardized, everything that I bring in on a RAW file, it's always going to be kind of interpreted the same way so that when I take it and I do my editing, it stays, universal across everything. I think some other programs do something kind of similar, where they, have a base profile. Well, these are, in essence, these are just LUTs, just named something different. In fact, the in-camera color profiles, photo styles, or whatever your camera calls it, they're essentially, in a broad sense, a LUT that is applied onto raw data to interpret what colors should be and how they should be represented in your final image. Now, in the video side of the world, we've been using these for years. LUTs, whether it's a corrective LUT or a creative LUT, these things have existed. And in the video side, they're typically designed so that they're taking the sensor's characteristics, because even though, red, green, and blue is red, green, and blue no matter what, every sensor has different tonal responses. They have different ways that they interpret this. There's different ways that each manufacturer determines how they want color to look in their camera. This is why you see all the debates between, we like Canon colors or Nikon colors or Sony colors or Panasonic LUMIX colors. That's where all that kind of comes from, because every brand, we all have our own interpretation. Some people like them, some people don't. So what we did with the launch of the S9 is we introduced a way to take that standardized file format, which is a LUT or a .cube file, CUBE, and apply that into the camera at your discretion. So this takes what is an industry standardized feature, something that if you had no clue what a LUT is or what a cube file is, if you just went into Google and typed, what is a LUT, you're going to find tons of information that explains it, that talks about how they're used. Now, if you're in the photography side, you're going to see a bunch of video-oriented information, but the principles are all the same. It doesn't matter if you're doing video, which is just, 24 frames or faster, loosely, 24 frames or faster, it's still images put together and played back in a string. It's not going to matter one way or another. So we chose this platform based on that. It's a standardized format. It's easy to be able to, on your own, be able to just do a quick search and find what information is. But also, it gives you a pretty unparalleled level of control on what you want your image to look like, whether it's a photo or a video. In the video side, knowing that LUTs are used for multiple different purposes. If you're someone who wants to go ultra clinical, the most accurate colors that you possibly can get, cool. You can either generate one that does that for you, or there are some that exist. Or if you're someone who really likes that creative look or that real stylistic appeal to your images, cool, you can apply those right away. And the benefit here is that you can do this, and from a raw image perspective, it's non-destructive. What I mean by that is that your raw file stays your raw file. This is applied between the raw and then your JPEG. So you get kind of the best of all sides of capture. The only downside when using things like LUTs in camera is that, well, your video footage has that information burned in. So if you're someone who captures in log because you want to be able to have flexibility in post, you don't necessarily want to record in a real-time LUT or with a LUT applied, because now that file is permanently locked into that color space. But we have tools in the camera that can help you with that, whether it's proxies or using things like Live View Assist instead of real-time LUT. Now, that shifts to, what can you do with them? Well, as in the Discord conversation, there was a lot of kind of back and forth about, like, I want to be able to create a LUT, or how does it actually, like, kind of work in the image? What is it actually doing? And the easiest way, and probably the most that I can say about this, at least the way we do it, is that excuse me, a LUT file or a .cube file is applied between the raw processed image, or the raw unprocessed image, and your JPEG conversion. Every camera will start with a raw file. Even if you tell the camera that you're only shooting JPEGs, it starts with a raw file, and then it generates that JPEG. And that JPEG will have applied things like the different in-camera photo styles, standard, vivid, natural, whatever it is that you're using. This is the same for all cameras. What we do with the LUT deployment is we can intercept that raw data and then apply the LUT into that format so that your JPEG now has the finalized, look and design that you wanted. Now, there's benefits here with this. Anyone that's been around long enough knows that, for one, JPEGs are 8-bit. And that means that if you're really trying to push it, you don't have a ton of flexibility to push a JPEG image that's already generated as a JPEG. You have nowhere near as much flexibility as a 10-bit HEIF file or a 14-bit or even a 12-bit RAW file, depending on what camera you're using. So our process happens before that conversion. Specific details I can't get into outside of that. So what this means is that if you're going to be generating or creating a look for your camera, there's a couple things you want to keep in mind. One, keep in mind that it's going to be based off the raw data coming from the image, whether it's video or still. That means that you typically have more flexibility than you think you do with how you would edit it. Now, apps like LUMIX Lab, well, the only app, LUMIX Lab, when we launched this, you only have JPEG editing to work and generate your looks. And this is a concept because of the fact that, one, no matter how you edit it in LUMIX Lab, even if you put a really aggressive, kind of approach on an image, when you apply it into that frame, like in the camera, it's going to apply that edit to the raw file. You could be too aggressive, you may not be too aggressive, and your image may be fine, but your JPEG preview may not look the greatest as you're doing your edits to it. Now, as you're kind of working with these things, I kind of lost my train of thought a little bit there. The LUTs are going to give you the massive flexibility. The piece you have to, that most people forget about, and this ties right to your comment, Dugiheim, is if you're using a LUT that's designed for the wrong profile, it's not going to look like what you want it to. So as you're thinking about deploying these, or looking at picking up a pack or a LUT from another creator, or using the LUMIX Lab app, which we're going to talk about in a second, you want to pay close attention to, well, what was that LUT designed on? What was the base of that LUT, built for? Because no matter what, raw images are not an image. There's nothing there. It doesn't know, it's not an image. It's just data. So you have to interpret it some way. And that comes into where standard, vivid, natural, all the different color profiles come into play. You would never truly have a raw file that you're going to, kind of work with. You're always looking at some sort of adapted version or an interpretation of what that data is. In the Adobe world, and this is why I used Adobe as an example, in the Adobe world, that is that profile selector. If you've never touched it, it's going to default to Adobe Standard or Adobe Adaptive, the new one. And you're probably looking at an image going, this looks nothing like I shot in the camera. Why does it not look right? Because it's being interpreted different than what you used as the tools to create the image. So when you're going to be creating a LUT, you need to know, what profile do I want to apply this LUT on top of, even if it is applying to the raw file? What do I want to apply this on top of? Because it has to be converted to something that can be visual anyway. So from that particular point, I want to drop over to Photoshop, actually, because this is where, right now I have an image opened. This is from my S5 Mark II X, and this is with the 16:35, I think. Yeah, 16:35. And this is a live view composite, but more importantly, this is a raw file. So this is an RW2 file. So if I wanted to generate and create my own look for the Real Time LUT system, I'm going to open this raw file in Adobe Camera Raw. I'm going to do my basic edits in this particular case because I want the image to look the way I want it, right? So in this case, I'm just going to throw an auto on it and just kind of go from there. So we've got this. Before I leave this particular point, you want to go to Profiles, and you want to select the profile that you want your LUT to end up being based off of. In this case, I'm going to choose Vivid. Now, once I've got that, this is interpreting the raw data to say, hey, use Panasonic's or Panasonic Lumix's Vivid approach to color so that I can make this adjustment. Once I'm there, I'm just going to click Open. This is going to open my image up, and we're going to be able to do some edits to it. Now, from here, in order to work in a process that allows me to generate a LUT, I'm going to work in layers for this. So let's say I want to come in here and I want to have this get a little bit, kind of less contrast, right? So let's say I want to come in and I want to do lighter. Just apply a little bit of a curve to it. Say I want to actually bring my highlights back just a little bit more for this particular scenario. And then say I really want to bring my shadows up a little bit higher on this particular one. So it looks like kind of an inverted S-curve. It's cool. We got that one down. You see that I've got that layer set up there. But then let's say I want to come in and I want to do, let's do a channel mixer. This is a kind of fun one. I do this for infrared work. So let's say I want to do a channel swap, or I want to mess with how the colors look. So I want to take red and let's make red 0, and let's swap that to blue. And then I want to come into blue, and I want to change this to red, and I want to swap this to inverted. Obviously, this looks really off. It's ultra neon, doesn't really look that great. And we can just kind of continue and play around with these however I want. So let's shift this blue around a little bit. Let's see, how blue do we want this to be? It would help if I set this back to 0. So let's start playing around with this. We see we can play around with these colors. I can make, let's make this all the way up here. Or let's make this to 100 here. And then let's go to red again, and let's shift some of the greens in there. Shift some of the red a little bit back out. Maybe I don't want it to be as that much. Shift the blues around. You see that the blues are adjusting really just that kind of center highlight part. Let's go back into blue and play around with this a little bit more. Make something that kind of really stands out. There we go. Turn it into a little bit more of like a turquoise or kind of greenish look. Cool. So I've got that edit, I've got that layer adjusted now, and now we know that my colors are going to change. So if I have something orange or red, it's going to come out more like this. And then last but not least, let's do something really as simple as let's add a photo filter. Let's say in this case I want to add kind of a sepia kind of tonality to it, and see we can play around with this and get it a little bit more on that brown side. Cool. So what you see here is that I'm layered editing the photo. So we started with this image. We added in a curve. We added in the channel mixer to swap out some channels. And then we added in some sepia to kind of like balance a little bit. Once you've got that done, right, leave all of your layers in this case. So I've got photo filter, channel mixer, and a curve. Then I'm going to come up and I'm going to go to File, Export, Color Lookup Tables. This is going to bring in a new box here to be looking at. First couple things you're going to do, you're going to make sure that your grid points are set to 33. And then you're going to go to Formats and make sure that you choose Cube as the format that you want to work with. Once you've got that selected, let me just plug this in. Once you've got that selected, then you're going to be able to apply the look that you want. This will let me say like, hey, all right, I want to save a cube. The description, you just describe it however you want. And then you're going to hit OK on this particular point. So it's a pretty straightforward, kind of simple tool to be working with, the looks. So now if we go in and we take a look here, I got my desktop here. We're going to come in and I'm going to just name this inverted look. And then I'm just going to save that out. Now that has saved that file. That saved it as a .cube file. Now just keep that in your mind. We have a new file that's called inverted. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to use something, in my case, I'm going to use the method that is probably recommended most to do with this, which is using something like Google Drive or some sort of other method that you can get it onto your mobile device. So, in this case, let's see here. Let me get this prepped. Cool, we are on that part. Let's go into here. Go into my LUTs. And we're going to go here. All right. So, I've got a number of different looks here set up in a Google Drive account. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a file. And then we'll see here, I have the inverted, let me move it away from my camera. I have the inverted look up here. We're going to add this in, give that a second. Now it's added into my folder that I want to use for my camera. Once you've got that up there, it's literally just the .cube file that we were looking at. So what I then do is go into LUMIX Lab. LUMIX Lab, you'll see, has an option here for LUTs. You'll have your device, which this is the whatever's on the particular device that LUMIX Lab's running on. And then I'm going to click this little button up top here that is the arrow facing down. I'm going to tap on that. And in this case, this is going to open up that folder that I had created online. And this will have the different LUTs that I have loaded in that Google Drive folder that we looked at. Now, at the moment, that LUT is not showing. So we're going to do it with a different one. So for this, let's say I want to take this Velvia 50 emulation. All right, cool. So I'm going to take that, tap on it. Now it's going to say import the LUT. So I can rename it however I want. But here I can pick the photo style. So this is where it's important to remember what that photo style was that we, based that edit on. So in this case, I'm going to tap on photo style. I'm going to look for, in this case, vivid, and I'm going to tap on vivid. Once you select those two, just tap set. Now that has been added into the LUT library in the app. And now it says, you'll see it has a little icon that says vivid next to it. This means that it is now tied and tagged to the vivid color profile. If I go into my gallery and I look up, picture of my pup, I can scroll over and you'll see that that one is now on there. So I've got that Velvia 50 look that I can apply, and I know that it's being applied to a vivid image because this image was captured as vivid. If I go back, you'll see right on the bottom it says, hey, this image was taken, the color profile is vivid, so I know which one I want to apply to it. But now I want to take that and I want to actually get that onto my camera. So how does that work? Well, first off, let's see if the one that I created has made it onto my Google Drive. I don't see it yet. So let's do this. Oh, wait, no, I have that one on there already. So now that I've got the LUT, at least in the app, what I can do is go to my camera. I can do LUT transfer. This is now going to the app, tells the camera, hey, we want to connect Wi-Fi, shake hands, so that I can actually then, send the LUTs between the devices. So now I'm going to go to device because I want what's on my app. Scroll all the way down. This one is the Velvia 50, tagged to Vivid. I'm going to tap on that. I want to transfer to camera. It pulls up what my library is on the camera. If I scroll down, we're going to go down and I'm going to set this to set 18 and then hit LUT transfer. That's it. That LUT is now tied onto my camera as the look that I wanted. So that's tied to Vivid. In that particular case, it's named the way I want it. And now it has actually been transferred from my tablet, in this case, or phone, or whatever device you want to use that has LUMIX Lab access. Now it's tied over to the camera. Last step here, I'm just going to hit disconnect Wi-Fi because I don't need it to be connected anymore. And now we can actually look back on the camera. So now when we're looking in the camera, this gives me a couple choices. I can then be saying like, hey, I want to come in here. I want to go to my photo styles. I want to go to Real Time LUT. Scroll down to where it lets me apply the LUT. I'm going to hit the focus selector. And then I can scroll through these. These are all the ones that have already been loaded onto the camera. And I can go all the way down to that Velvia 50 look that I had. Or a different look that I created. Even into an inverted one. Or some of the other ones. So this allows me to be able to, just grab the ones that I want and apply them. The cool thing about this, and it's a little hard to see here, maybe if I shift the camera a little bit, you might be able to see it against the background. Yeah. So right above where my cursor is selected, you see the color profile is changed to Vivid. That's saying because the LUT knows I am tagged for Vivid, make sure my base profile is tagged to the same look. If you load a LUT on here that's not tied to any particular color profile, that's going to default as Vlog. And when that happens, you most likely will end up getting either a look that is super washed out, or your exposure's all wonky on it, the colors are probably not going to look right, because you're trying to apply a look that's not designed for the Vlog color profile response. So I can change this, let's go to that inverted one that I created. Again here, this one now changed it to standard because that's what I built that one off of. So you have a ton of flexibility working with these different kind of looks on how you want them to be deployed. What do you want them to be tied to? How do you want to work with them? How do you even want to create them? Now, that brings up one kind of last major point about working with LUT files. If I'm going to go in through the process and I'm going to create my own in something like Photoshop, there's a couple things you need to keep in mind that will not work in a LUT. Things like vignetting. Things like added grain effect. Things like if you're using, edge detail, stuff like that. There are certain types of edits that are not color related that cannot be transferred through a .cube file. So anything that you want to make adjustments to in the way the color response is per pixel, those will work. Anything you do that's more of an effect, like say you want to apply like noise reduction to an image or, you know, whatever, that stuff can't be contained in a .cube file or a LUT file, so they won't transfer to the camera. If you edit a photo and you put a really nice vignette on it and you make it look this like awesome look, or you put a, you know, kind of layer on top of it that adds like, you know, a border, like a frame, things like that, none of those things can transfer through LUTs. So where you would work with those, if you know that like you typically like to apply grain to an image, or, you know, maybe you want to apply a vignette to an image, you're going to end up applying those in a couple of different ways. Either you can use the in-camera control. So if I go into the Real Time LUT tool here, you'll see that I can go down and I can apply a grain effect, and I can apply, you know, color grain or not. So you do have some control with that, which will apply to the particular image. You even have the ability to play around with the opacity here. So you'll see that in this case, because I did an inverted look, it can look really, really weird, what kind of controls you have. 50% means that it's basically gray because there's nothing there. If I turn it back to 0, now it's a full color image. I can start to kind of invert those colors, but once you hit 50, then it starts to invert it. But you can play around with how effective you want that look to particularly be. So that's kind of like the big general talk about LUTs. I want to go back to the questions and see, because that was a lot of information all in one go. So yeah, Doogie Ham, hopefully that kind of addressed it. I know it's a really long-winded way to address your question or your comment, but in essence, you're probably using a LUT that's not tied to the correct base profile. Diva says, there's been a report of folks posting issues with the AF in the S1. Is there any fix coming? I have not seen those reports that you claim. I haven't seen the reports. I have seen people recognizing that phase autofocus can be very twitchy. If you're moving fast, just go on YouTube and look up anyone that's been streaming for a while, and you'll see, you know, if you move, there are certain situations where any PDAF camera can be tripped up like that. Let's see here. Let's see here. Lots of conversations there. Matt, thanks for helping out with that. Has anyone looked into why the repair tool can be downloaded on the S series serial number, or is this by design? Asking because I had 2 more people ask me. I mean, the video repair tool, yeah, it does need an S series serial number with it. I don't know why. I know Matt and I have asked about it, but honestly not sure. Yeah, sorry. Tails, is there an official fandom name for LUMIX? I'm calling myself a LUMIXer for now. I have no idea. That's up to y'all on what you want to call those that are LUMIX lovers or LUMIX users, whatever you want to call. Let's see here. Where you're connected to the camera, can you import a photo from the camera and show in lab that the photo style is automatically selected for building the LUT in lab? Yeah. Let's do this. Let's change to this view. So my camera's still connected. So say I want to take, let's do this image. Cool. We've got a look. Now I'm going to do transfer photo and video. We're going to connect into the camera. So the LUMIX Lab app, once you go through the initial process, the Bluetooth connecting and then do the Wi-Fi automatically, it's going to say like, hey, we can connect you here. So one of the things that you'll notice here is like, okay, this is set to standard. These images were all set to vivid. Let's grab the new one that I just took. So let's take this image. Let's transfer this over. Now that that image is transferred over, if I back out of here, we're going to disconnect the camera, go to gallery. Now when we look at it, you'll see here again, it's tied to standard. So it already knows what I've got it set up here. Now, if I come in here and say I want to make some edits, so let's say I want to adjust some tonality or some color here. Let's just make like a really ridiculous edit to this. Let's invert an inverted image. Super ridiculously bad edit. But now say I want to save this as a LUT from this particular edit. So I've shot this in standard. I know that I'm tied to that particular image. Now I can just hit the arrow button up top. So it's my export. And then I can do create a LUT. You'll see that it automatically ties to the photo style that that LUT was created for. And then I can name it. So let's name this INRT2. Hit set. Now what's cool is I can then go back, go to the camera, do LUT transfer again, and we'll get this thing set up. Oh, hey, Cam's here. Hey, Cam, yeah, I saw the message. I'm looking forward to checking out your LUTs, man. You put a lot of effort into them, I know, so I'm really looking forward to it. So now we'll see here this standard, this INRT is the one that I just saved from an edit on LUMIX Lab. So I can tap this, transfer to camera. We're going to scroll down. Let's add this into set 19. Let's transfer that over. Let's go back to the camera. Let's disconnect. Now I'm just doing it that way, forcing the disconnect, because that's just my personal workflow. I can't really give you any other reason better than that. It's just how I naturally have always worked with it. All right, so now we're looking into the camera. So now what I can do is go into my photo styles again, go to the LUT, and then now you'll see I will have INRT2. That actually looks pretty sick on the camera, I'm not gonna lie. For just something fun playing around with, I think I made kind of an interesting look, kind of a weird backwards. I think I'm gonna actually really like that one. If anyone wants a copy of that, let me know. I will happily send the .cube file to people to play around with. It's a totally broken look, but hey, go for it. So that's what's kind of like cool with being able to use the couple different ways that you have to generate, you know, different looks. You can either do it the more complex way of working in something like Photoshop, where you can work in your layers to do your edits, but just remember that the looks are only able to be applied that really would adjust color or tonality. If you're trying to apply effects to an image, they're not really going to transfer. Or I can just straight up use the app. I can use it, you know, however I want, do my edit with it, and know that I have some pretty good flexibility on how hard I can push that particular look, because in stills, it's going to be applied to the raw format, then converted to either the HEIF or the JPEG image. Now that we have the cameras that support HEIF file format, it really, the benefit that you're going to see in creating your looks is that it's a little bit closer to the raw file, so I can push that HEIF file harder to make my adjustments before that file in itself breaks apart. But know that it's still going to apply whatever you're tuning into that look to the raw file. So you have more kind of unseen flexibility in how you want them, you know, working for your final look. Never thought of using Google Drive to transfer LUTs to LUMIX Lab. Thanks. Yeah, I find personally using, at least because I'm primarily an Android user, Google Drive to me seems to be one of the most seamless methods of doing it. On my iOS devices, I've tried using like, you know, File and stuff like that, but Apple just, this is going to sound like a fanboy statement. Apple is just terrible at file formatting and like how you can manage your own files. And if I want to take something down and store it locally, like then I got to find it later. Maybe it's just an experience thing because I don't really use my Apple devices like that. I'm used to how it works with Android, but being able to use and just load those files into a Google Drive or any kind of online, file storage solution, because you can pick anything that you want, means that I can pretty much have an infinite capability of it. One of the other cool things that actually can happen if you've got a bunch of people in an Apple ecosystem is you can even like airdrop cube files to each other. So I can have a look on my laptop that I really like, that I edited. I can then airdrop it to my iPhone and then go into the app, download it, or open up Lab and then search for it, find it, and drop it into the app as well. And that gives me the same flexibility. I just find Google Drive tends to be a little bit easier. But yeah, it makes things so sick. Doogie Ham, just wondering where you obtain the Velvia 50 and Velvia 100 profiles. So those are actually versions of Art of Photography, Ted Forbes presets that he has for Lightroom and Capture One. I'm not sure if he's ever released .cube files, but yeah, those were based off those. Let's see here. Cam says, I like to make different looks per client so I can show them the back of the camera. Builds confidence with them in your ability when they can see their own brand look on the back of the camera. Totally. So if you're working in a much more professional sense, being able to actually display those looks becomes a really kind of powerful tool in how you are selling to your client. If you're a much more casual user and, maybe you're not doing client work, maybe this is just much more for your own, kind of personal hobby and, what you like to do, great. But if you're in a much more, higher end production sense, being able to see these things applied can be really, really powerful. So that brings up, if I am recording video, how do I view the LUT without damaging or overwriting my vlog footage? So to start with, you'll see like, hey, I've got the option in here. So say I want to be recording in vlog. Great, cool. I'm recording vlog, but I don't want to monitor vlog. I want to be able to monitor the look that I have generated because that's how I want to set my exposure and I want to work with my tools that way. There's a couple ways to do this. What you're going to do, and the primary way to do this, is you're going to go down into your custom settings and you're going to look for the option that says Log View Assist. You're then going to go into the Log View Assist option. You're going to go to LUT Select, and then you would scroll down to find a vlog based profile. Now again, this is again also so that you know that the look that I'm applying is going to be built off of vlog. So I will scroll down. In this case, I think I only have one on here that's designed for vlog, which is the Daydream one here. So now I can click Daydream. Now that means that, okay, this is now set and loaded to say, hey, if I turn View Assist on, I'm going to be using Daydream as my previewed LUT. Then I have an option here for the monitor or for HDMI. In this case, because I'm HDMI out from the camera to my capture card, I'm going to turn HDMI on. Now I am recording in vlog, so my log footage is what's actually being stored, but I am previewing with the look that I want my client to see or how I want to view it so that I can set my exposures right, so that I can visually confirm what my image is going to look like. Now, this brings up the other point about false color. We talked about this weeks ago. If you're using false color on the new cameras, you'll notice that false color disables the LUT first and then runs false color based off of the vlog footage, so that you know what your exposures are set to, because if you're properly exposing, you're going to expose vlog the way you need it to be exposed, and then your LUT should be applied so that it brings things to the point you want. So if you're someone who likes to overexpose vlog by, say, 2 stops or a stop or however it is that you work, you want to make sure that your LUT is designed properly for that as well. So you would basically come in and say like, hey, you know, if I'm using false color, am I setting this up so that my skin tones are at 42 IRE or my gray point is at 42 IRE? Cool. When it's off, then my LUT's going to look the way it should. If you are someone who exposes like 2 stops over, but then we, you know, kind of apply that and just start running with it, you're going to notice that your LUT's going to look dark. And you may have to come in and say like, hey, I need to overexpose my image by a stop or 2 stops or whatever. You can build those things into the LUTs based on how bright or dark you want the response to be. So that's because that's affecting the pixel colors and the tonality. You can adjust it so that your LUT kind of slides a little bit brighter. Yeah. So that's kind of like one of the big benefits there. The other way that you can work with this is let's turn log assist off. So we're just looking at log footage now. The other thing that you can do is if you're someone who likes to record proxies, if you're in a workflow scenario where you would prefer to be able to capture your full 4K footage and then have your 1080p proxies ready to go, but you want to be able to record log, but you want your proxies to be with the LUT applied. So I've done this before with, you know, kind of social media content. I want my main project to still be recorded in log, so I have full-blown editing and flexibility, but the client needs quick deliverable. This is where I would set the camera up and I would be recording in a mode that allows me to shoot in proxies. Now, we talked about this the other day, actually last week, about picking an option that can record with proxies. So in this case, we're just going to turn proxies on, and let's set this to C4K 60p. All right, so we're in C4K 60p. This is an option that allows me to use proxy. So we'll go into proxy. I'm going to turn proxy on. Actually, I have to remember to put an SD card in here so it'll actually let me record the proxy. You do have to have 2 media sources in the camera for proxy recording. And if you've ever wondered, on the opposite side of my screen, I just pointed at my computer screen like you can see it. Underneath the HDMI icon there, you'll see a little 2 boxes, one with a PX on it, that tells you that you have proxies enabled. But what you'll see is that Real Time LUT for proxy, I can't enable it because it says that I'm in vlog. But what the heck? I want to be able to, I want to shoot vlog, but I want to have proxies applied. Well, this is a little bit of a, it's a different way of thinking. I'm going to put the camera into Real Time LUT. I'm going to pick the LUT that I want. In this case, I'm going to come in and let's set this to that really wild, wicked one that I created before. Cool. We've got this one selected. The most important thing here is turn the LUT off. Once that's off, now, actually no, this is a bad example because I need to choose one that's for vlog. So let's go to Bloom. We're in Bloom. So this is the one that's designed for, well actually that one's designed for flat. Let's just use the Vlog 709. This is the default one. This one's set for Vlog, so this means that your base profile is Vlog. When it's on, it's going to be Vlog to 709. So, most importantly, once you pick your LUT, turn it off. Just have it loaded that that's the LUT that you want to use. Once that's done, we're going to be in Real Time LUT. I'm going to go back to the one that I want. I'm going to hit off and I'm going to hit set. This confirms that I'm in Real Time LUT with a Vlog as a base and my Vlog to 709 loaded as the Real Time LUT option to choose. Once you've got that, just go to your proxy settings. Real Time LUT proxy will be available to be turned on. Now my main recording to card slot 1 is going to be in vlog, and now my proxy file is going to be recorded with the LUT applied. The benefit here is, like I said, for one, means that if I'm shooting in a scenario where I need to have fast delivery, my 1080p proxy is already ready to go. It's color graded, or it's closer to the final look, and I can just start working with it and deliver. If it's on the SD card, I can take that card out, hand it to the client, they can start working. If I'm using something like Frame.io, because we have Frame.io in this camera, that means that I can have my proxy files uploading to Frame.io while I'm out on the field, so that my off-site media agency can be taking those down and starting to actually begin to work with it. This also allows, if you're someone who's working with an off-site colorist, you could skip this entire process, not actually have the LUT applied to the proxy, so that they can be working with a 10-bit 1080p proxy that they can begin doing all of their edits to, and then when you're done for the day, you just upload your full res imagery, get it over there, and then link everything in post for it. So you've got lots of flexibility with it. What does Matt say? So what Sean is showing, you can have the internal master file and log proxy with a LUT, and you can still use a LUT view assist for monitoring on the LUT camera. Kind of. So yeah, I could be sitting here because I'm in real time LUT. I have to double check this. I think because I'm in real time LUT. Yes, because I am in real time LUT, I can still apply the look there because of the way our system's designed. So we'll confirm this again. So we'll see that I am in LUT with vlog. And then if I go back down into my LUT selection, go to the right page. Let's change this back to vlog. So now I can still be previewing on the camera with the vlog view assist. I can have my proxy with that LUT burned in, and my main file is still being recorded in log so that I have full flexibility of it in post. Again, this is kind of the underpinning as to why we chose LUT for our general color profiles. We want it to be able to say, hey, you want one of the most flexible options there is to be able to change different color profiles and adjust different variables for your particular style that you want to go for. And you want something that when I bring this to say, hey, my editing software, I can work with the same files. I don't have to say, well, I really like working in the way, Resolve has this look that I've created. I want to kick this out. Well, if I'm, working in different programs, you may have, is it a .icc profile? Is it a .cube file? Is it some proprietary format? Do I even have an option to save them out? There are others out there that do like these recipes and stuff like that, but the biggest problem there is that they're still based on a very limited scale of, I can only work with this base, and I only have maybe these 5 or 6 adjustments that I can make. On our system, it's near infinite how many different changes and adjustments and tweaks you can make to the colors. I can go in and create something like a spot color profile if I really wanted to, because that is something that can be adjusted to where the LUT says, hey, interpret all red pixels as red, but interpret every other pixel that's not red or any other color that's not red as black and white or shades of gray. So you have those different tools with it where the general option doesn't. Kevin says, would be nice to show the photo style base vlog natural when flipping through LUTs. So I think we do actually have that option. So if we go into the settings here, I go to, if I go to LUT library, it says it right there. So teal flat S is standard, natural, Cine V2, vlog, natural, all that stuff. So there is an option in here when you go into the LUT library to actually be able to take these and find them. The last thing I want to show, let's see if I can do this quickly. Let's take this, let's go here. let's take this one. Let's go here. What I want to show you is all right. Let's do that. Okay. The last thing I want to show, let's see if I did this right, is what I just did here is I took the LUT that we create, or one of the LUTs that I've created. I've just dropped it onto an SD card. So now I can go into LUT library. I can scroll all the way down here to set 20. I can load from the SD card, and now I see inverted look.cube, and I can load that onto the camera. What you'll notice, and this is probably what happens to most if you're not using LUMIX Lab to link these files in, is that this is not tied to any particular color profile now. So if I want to use this inverted look versus the invert one that I have in here that's tied, this one now can be applied to anything. This can be just used for whatever. So if I come in here and I go into Real Time LUT and I go into my looks and I change this to inverted look.cube, you'll notice that this tries to apply it over Vlog, and notice how washed out, how weird this looks versus the one that's actually designed to be over a standard profile. So if you're ever wondering why you apply a look, or for one, you actually see the full name, it says inverted look.cube, or whatever file that you've named it .cube, that's telling you like, hey, that's not assigned to anything, which means it's going to default to Vlog if you're in the real-time LUT option. You can also run in and say like, hey, I want to actually record in my photo style, which is then where I can say like, hey, I want to change my base profile. So let's change this to vivid. I can then scroll down to the LUTs and I can apply that look, inverted cube, and it's there. Cool, it's added. This lets me kind of get around some of that for the different looks. So couple different ways that you can work with the different looks in real-time LUT on how you want to work with them. And yeah, pretty straightforward, or at least I think it's pretty straightforward, but that's because I've worked with these for, God, since we first launched, actually before we even first launched these things. All right, let's run back through some of these questions and see. Can this be done with the S1H? No, unfortunately, this isn't something that you can do with the S1H. Well, you can't use real-time LUT on the S1H because it's the older engine. The S1H, you do have View Assist, which lets you apply the Vlog to 709 look, and you could load .vlt. So you would have to convert your .cube files to a .vlt, which is the Veracam's LUT format, to be able to do the to be able to load it onto the camera and view it. If you go back and look, there's articles about it a while ago. Not really going to cover it too much right now. Kevin says it would be nice to show photo style base Vlog natural extent when flipping through the LUTs. Yeah, it would be. So what I'd say is that I can understand if you're generally working with them. Technically our system is designed so that like it shouldn't really matter anymore if you're in real-time LUT, because if I'm looking through here and I'm changing these, the way our system's designed, these are already tied, so you can't even change them. So this will always be standard when it's in the camera. If I'm looking out in the standard image here, I can see, okay, maybe you do want that under standard or not, or listed as standard, but because you can't change that base, that's why it's not listed. It's already tied to whatever that base profile would be. But if there's a good enough reason for it, can maybe take a look at why it would be there, but it is also in the app too. Are the internal LUTs different to the ones coming with the S9, or are the S9 Real Time LUTs available to download for the S5IIX anywhere? So the Real Time LUT stuff is the Real Time LUTs are universal on the LUMIX side because they're based off our base color profiles. The ones that are default in the S9 that are sample 1, 2, and 3 are the same ones that are sample 1, 2, and 3 on the S5II series, are the same that are sample 1, 2, and 3 on the S1 series. All of that stuff's going to be the same. Yeah. Are they available to download anywhere? I have to check in on that. Someone had asked me that question. I think it was either last week or in the Discord. I think someone asked about it. I forget exactly what their names are, but they are in the lab app, I believe. So yeah, you can. I think if you go into LUMIX Lab, you should be able to find them in there. Let's take a look, see if there were any other questions and stuff here. Love your LUMIX t-shirt. Are they available to buy? Unfortunately, no. We don't have an apparel e-com at this particular time. But I really do like this shirt. This was back from the S5 Mark II launch. So it's like all the different features and stuff around the camera. Make sure I didn't miss any other questions here. Yeah, I know they're close to double the price, but okay, so those are housings. We talked about that one. We talked about that. We talked about that one. I think I got most of the questions that have been dropped in there. Yeah. All right. All right, let's see some of the other ones here. Will there be Arilog for the S5II? Should I sell it for another S1II? Neither Matt or I know whether or not Arilog C3 would ever come to anything other than the S1II series. I'm a firm believer of if you have a need for things now, buy it. If your system can't do it right now, there's no guarantee that things will ever come in the future for any of this stuff. Yes, we do have a really good history of trying to, bring future or newer features back as far as we can. But I think a lot of times we kind of forget that, one, not everything is appropriate to put on every other cameras. Like I saw some question in here about, is proxy recording coming to the S9 in the future? No. The S9 is not built for any of that. The S9 was not built for things like, Arilog or proxy recording or, the higher end. Like it doesn't have all intra options, like all that kind of stuff, because it's not built for those uses. So why should it have that? It's like the G9 Mark II. G9 Mark II is not going to get everything that the, higher end cameras have or the more video oriented cameras have because it's a photo leaning, micro four thirds camera. It's not going to get everything that the GH7 has. It's just how it is. If you're looking for a product, you're looking for an option out there, and you want to pick the best product for your needs, you have to actually really look and see what do those products, what is the camera being sold as. That'll give you an indication as to whether or not you're going to see, potentially, other things added to them. And in the end, there's never a guarantee that the latest and greatest features that everyone clamors for can or will make it back to other products. That's just a reality of it. So, Leo, if you need Arilog C3 for your workflow, your most logical choice right now is an S1II, an S1II, or an S1R2. Yeah. Cliff, is Capture One still the preferred S1R2 RAW viewer? Has Adobe fixed their quality problems yet? I still very heavily recommend Capture One over Adobe for the S1R2. For whatever reason, Adobe still demolishes the shadows for no reason when I work with their file. When I work with the S1R2 files on Adobe, Capture One, I see none of those problems. And I've read on the Adobe forums that there's some others that are having some issues with the S1II on Adobe's platform as well that don't exist in Capture One. So I'm still at a point where I can't recommend using Adobe for the S1R2 or the S1II at this time until their raw software is kind of sorted. And that's painful to say because I grew up using Adobe forever. I will still use Premiere to edit video, but yeah, I've shifted short of very specialized needs that being able to work in layers in Photoshop or really quick things in Adobe Lightroom Mobile because I can quickly get that on my Android device. I switched everything over to Capture One for me. I have faith that they'll figure it out, but it's a little ridiculous that it's taken this long. But that's also, if I highly recommend, if people don't know what I'm talking about, I highly recommend going to take a look at Manny Ortiz, his video that he did around the launch of the S1R2, but the follow-up video that he made. Not the first one's good too, but if you watch his follow-up, he talks about his experiences between raw photo editing on multiple cameras in Adobe versus Capture One and the results that were very different between the two editing programs. Timmer says, is it possible to apply LUTs in LUMIX Lab to the underlying raw image instead of the output that may already have the LUT applied to it? Well, so LUMIX Lab doesn't have raw photo editing capabilities. So with the way the app runs now, you're having to work on the JPEG. If we ever decide to add raw editing support to it, if it's possible, then the system's going to work the way you'd expect it to, where anything LUT that you apply would be on the raw file. But just keep in mind that LUMIX Lab, you are working with JPEGs or HEIF files. So you're always going to have that look baked into it at that point. Tommy says, did you see my feature suggestion of an optional simulated split prism focus target when in manual focus? Yes, I did see that. There's a few problems with it because you have nothing that can generate the parallax. It would be interesting. It'd be like a faux blurry, like different stages of blur. It would be a really cool thing to see. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know how it would feasibly work, but we can always suggest stuff like that. Right now, if I downloaded an image with LUT applied, I think it's a JPEG. Applying a LUT to it just stacks on top of the existing one. Yeah. So because they're JPEGs, they already have the LUT built into it. When you load it in the app, it's already going to have the LUT applied to it. So you're stacking them essentially. And that's just because LUMIX Lab doesn't edit raw files. So you would need to do your edits in something else for that part. Cool. I think I got through the vast majority of the questions. Are there plans to bring the focus ring customization to the S5II? Just bought the 24-60. Would love to be able to set focus ring to exposure comp or aperture. Matt and I have asked about that. I honestly don't know. I'm not sure if there's any kind of like limitations on the new chassis or the newer version of the engine. But we'll ask again. I know, especially when it comes to lens stuff, we're really good at bringing things like that back, but we'll definitely have to ask. So, how to update with LUMIX Lab? If you get the notification, just follow the on-screen prompts. LUMIX Lab will tell you have an update if you've attached the camera to LUMIX Lab before. Creative, does this process work the same for creating a monitoring LUT for vlog? Yes. The process I did for, Lightroom, or in this case Photoshop, or if you're using something like Resolve to create your edit and your look and all that kind of stuff, 100%, that will do the same for if you just want to create a monitoring LUT. The nice thing with doing it, like if you're only going to use it for a monitoring LUT, you can drop the precision down to like 17. They're a little lighter weight. They're a little closer. They're not as precise as a 33. The camera can handle up to 33, so it's fine to just use a 33-point LUT in the camera. Don't load 65-point LUTs into the camera. Kind of really doesn't like that, and the app will actually tell you, like if you try to go through the process of loading it into LUMIX Lab, it's going to tell you can't use this. It needs to be 33, or it'll tell you because it's a 65-point LUT, it can't be loaded. So just kind of keep that in mind. Yeah, just different precisions on there. Any other questions that came through? I noticed that Adobe standard profile adds a ton of chroma noise to the shadows. Is that a known thing? Yes, that is an Adobe thing. Doesn't happen in Capture One. Capture One's the one that we worked with on the launch of the cameras, the S1II series. So I don't know what Adobe's doing with it, but the biggest problem is that a lot of people judge image quality based off Adobe, and Adobe is giving skewed results. So some outlets are saying that image quality is not as good when they're using a flawed editing software for it. We've made people aware of this, and they choose to not understand. So it's a problem across the entire industry. Top-down driver on the S1R Mark II. Can I edit a single custom setting, C1, C2, etc., change it from aperture priority to shutter priority while leaving all other settings intact? Can't figure it out. I think you had asked this last week or one of the previous streams. So I started playing around with it, but I haven't really gone through enough of the settings for it. What you could, I believe, what you can do, and this might be worth testing top-down, is if you go into that C1, C2, whatever the settings are that the option is that you want, go into that and then change the camera to the priority mode that you want. So if you've got the system set up for aperture priority, but you want it to be shutter priority, no, this would only work on the newer cameras. If you're using an S1II, S1R2, or S1IIe, you could do it this way, I think. For photo and video, is you would go into the C1, C2, whatever profile, go into the menu and change the mode through the menu, and then go back down into your settings and save that, and that should overwrite but keep all the settings that you had with the new exposure priority settings applied. So if you want to take C1 and carbon copy to C2, but you want it to be in shutter priority instead of aperture priority, you would go to C1, software change it to shutter priority, and then go back to your saved camera settings and save it into C2. That should do that. If you're on the previous cameras, so S5 Mark II series and older, it would only, I think, work in video because it's creative movie mode. That's why I haven't had enough time to actually go through all of the different ways to test it. But yeah, I'll try to look more through it. I think, yeah, I'll try to look more through it and see if I can address it next week. There's a chance I might be out and might have to do a recorded stream next week, or I might not even be able to get to a stream next week. But yeah, we'll try to get you some info on it. Cool. All right. Thanks so much for the streams. Now I understand how to use LUTs properly. Awesome. Hey, if even one person walks away with, a better understanding or some more experience on how to use something, I feel like I've had a good win there. So, all right, cool. It is almost 2:30 here in Texas, so I do have to wrap up the stream today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and listening to me ramble and talk about things like LUTs and create a really wild, weird-looking LUT that I kind of really have a hankering to go out and shoot with now. I may be back next week. It kind of depends on what my schedule has going. There's a chance I may have to fly out for a commercial video shoot, which would be really fun. I'm really hoping that it is on the schedule for next week. Otherwise, we will be here on Thursday at 2 p.m. If you've got other topics or other items that you want us to discuss on LUMIX Live, either leave it down in the comment section of this video once it's after we're live, or join us over on Discord. It's Discord. Well, actually, the /LUMIX USA one doesn't work anymore. I think it timed out. But there's a link down in the description for the Discord. Join us over there. I'm more active on there than I've been in a while, but you can always tag me. I'm Sean from LUMIX over there on Discord, so you can always reach out. We can continue these conversations. It's kind of the nice thing about Discord is that it's a continuous touchpoint conversation that you can have with us from LUMIX. A bunch of us are over there. If you've got topics, if you've got questions, if you've got stuff that you want to, see us talk about on the stream, or if you just want to have a conversation about some of this stuff over chat board, hit us up over there. You can always check us out over on Instagram, TikTok as well. We're still active on all those platforms. And yeah, if you liked this conversation today and you feel we deserved it, give us a like on the video. That helps us with the algorithms, obviously. If you're not subscribed, maybe we've earned a subscription from you already. They're free. They cost you nothing. And you'll get notifications when we go live for the live streams. Outside of that, get out there, create some cool stuff. Maybe try LUTs if you've never used them before. The LUMIX Lab app makes it really, really easy to kind of create your own looks and all that kind of fun stuff. Yeah. Hope everyone has a good rest of your day, good weekend. Get out there, create some cool stuff, and yeah, we'll see you sometime next week. Later.